Wait, hold on. What happened to John?
Obviously.
Oh, there. Okay, never mind. He's back.
He resents being the white slave.
I do not.
Well, whatever.
All right, great.
Good evening, everyone.
I literally called him the white slave on Twitter, so it's fine.
He did. Now I acknowledge that. It's fine. I'm fine with that.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode. I don't know why I say good evening every time. I realize most people watch this afterwards.
Awesome.
Wait, hold on. What happened to John?
Yeah, we're still not on YouTube, right?
Yeah, no, I'm on the YouTube right now, and I don't see this.
He's back.
He resents being the white slave.
Can you just tell me?
I checked Ben's channel.
All right, great.
Welcome to the fun part of the beginning of the show. What goes on when guys aren't actually.
Which is us yelling at each other about fucking shit up. So
silence everyone. So where are we streaming? Only to Facebook right now? I realize most people watch this afterwards. Well, we'll stop the streaming. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Discourse. I am your host, Brandon Sutton, and joining me, as always, is my lovely panel of progressive pundits. Sorry for the delay. And before I introduce my panel, let me just say, if you're joining us on YouTube or Periscope or any of these other places, make sure you go over to our SoundCloud where you can pick up this show and other shows and shows that never make it to those platforms in audio only form. That SoundCloud is, of course, soundcloud.com/expanded discourse. It is spelled exactly how it sounds. EXPANDTHEDISCOURSE. And I hope I spelled that out. Oh my God, did I spell that correctly?
No, you did not.
I did.
I'm just playing. I think you did.
I was like, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to embarrass myself like. Okay, so yeah, and if you're listening to this later on SoundCloud, congratulations, you're one of the many few who take my advice seriously. So starting off, joining me as always is my producer, Richard. Say hello, Richard. Oh, and of course, my Socratic life partner, Adair. Say hello, Adair. Or Thucydides life partner.
Shut the hell up. Thank you for watching, folks. Appreciate you having us with us. And I'm really, really sorry you have to deal with Brandon and all of this bullshit. Please. It gets worse.
Adair, you're starting to sound more and more like every woman I've ever dated.
I feel bad for every woman you've ever dated.
Don't you feel bad for the non-women I've dated? You sexist.
I feel bad for them too.
Anyway,
I genuinely feel bad for anyone that has to be in your
rounding off this square is the lovely John McDonald. Say hello, John.
How's it going? Glad to be the lovely this time around. That's very nice. I wondering if
the honorable.
Oh, that's good too. I was wondering if it was the red beard that made me the lovely this time.
We don't have sound, guys, on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
That was probably just me because notoriously I'm so good at remembering to unmute, and so you guys should have sound. It was probably just me.
No, according to them, they still can't hear. I'm in there right now, and it's showing me. According to Venom 98-216 can't hear the Hidden Socialist sound. They've been here this whole time, and I guess there's been no sound.
Let me it's on now.
Are we getting sound, folks?
Technical difficulties.
Oh my gosh.
Takes a moment for the stream to catch up.
My phone, of course, is just.
I don't know if it's my connection or if it's what's going on, because this shit is hella laggy right now.
That's what I'm getting as well. It's both.
I got sound on YouTube.
Right. Okay, so sound on YouTube. Right. Sorry about that, real quick. Let's just jump straight into it. Obviously, no more introductions, no more technical difficulties. We're going to jump straight into the conversation. So, for those of you who have been paying attention to the machinations of the Democratic and Republican parties, 2 days ago, while I was in the middle of watching Wonder Woman, a perfectly adequate, awful, mediocre, great, awesome, best movie ever, cut where applicable for yourself, John Ossoff was busy losing the District 606 Georgia House race to a woman who said that she was not in support of a livable wage. My God. I mean, okay, so frankly, I'm going to put this out there. It's going to sound like, Monday morning quarterbacking, but I thought he was going to lose.
I called it on the show. I called it the last time we talked about it.
I just thought I'd play it for
$30 million. How do you not lose?
Sorry, what'd you say there?
Like, how do you expect? They spent $30 million. How do you expect him to not lose? Anytime the DNC spends an exorbitant amount of money, they always lose. Like, that is, you can death, taxes, and the Democrats losing when they spend just ridiculous amounts of money. You can take on those every time.
I've got some really interesting statistics about that money. So he lost by 3.8 points to Handel. Clinton lost in that district by 1.5 points. So he actually lost ground, whereas every other special election, they've gained ground versus Clinton versus Trump in 2016. Another really awesome part was
awesome.
The previous guy who ran against Tom Price literally paid $1,000 to register for the seat and didn't run an advertisement at all. In fact, when people went looking for the guy, they couldn't find him. So they tried to find this guy, couldn't find him, couldn't see what he was doing, and couldn't interview him for questions. And he won exactly 124,914 votes. Ossoff spent $184 per vote to get, I think it was 124,516 votes. So he actually lost in terms of turnout from the guy who didn't even show up to run against Tom Price.
I mean, so it was a special election, so I can sort of forgive that a little bit. I can also kind of forgive him. Oh no, I can't. I'm sorry. I was gonna say I can forgive him getting less votes than Hillary Clinton because obviously he didn't have the name recognition that she had. But that
wasn't Hillary Clinton. That was actually a no-name guy who ran.
No, I'm talking about like him going down in margins from what she lost, how much she lost the district to Trump.
Okay,
is what I mean. Not necessarily, her overall. The real problem here is, like Adair said, how much money was spent on this. They basically set $30 million on fire. Worse than set $30 million on fire, like they did 4 things. I mean, they did 3 things with that money, right? So, they spent that money to prove a point that centrism is the actual path forward for the Democratic Party. They threw money at this race because they wanted to prove that centrism, that center-left ideology is the path forward. That the goal for the Democratic Party should still be to, win over this mythical center-right Republican, this Romney Republican who just doesn't like Trump. And, finally, it was to launder money to consultants and other organizations that were run by ex-DCCC staffers. It's like that's where that money went.
Yeah. $3.5 million went to an email advertising campaign that was for end-of-the-world emails that were laughable. And the guy who's running that campaign created a consulting party and worked for the DCCC in as late as 2015, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, their decision to run a 5th grader for this seat.
Lanyard and Smooth Boy.
That's not he looks like he belongs in the cast of Degrassi. Like he's a sweet boy, But Richard, what did you think of the race?
Well, just get my excuse me, sorry about that. Get myself set up here. I'm not surprised that he lost. I think Adair brings a good point about the money, and I think you highlight excellent points about where that money went. And as such, I think that's part of why Democrats are so quick to call it a win, because for what they stand for, in a lot of ways, it was. Centrist candidate nearly eking out a victory in a Republican seat while spending collecting and spending millions and millions of dollars is exactly what they want. They want candidates who are going to be able to bring in as much money as they can, and if that means losing to a Republican, that's fine. If that means winning, then that's fine, as long as they don't have to pass anything too progressive in order to make good on their promises once they get there. And so I think we'll be seeing a lot more of that in 18. I don't think you're going to be seeing any changes from what you saw from Ossoff in the Democratic strategy.
Oh no, I definitely agree. And so at this point, they might as well just dug a hole and buried the money for how much good it actually done in winning that seat. But it's also worth mentioning that of the the 5 special elections, he did the worst with the most amount of money. Like he did the worst. He did worse than Quist. He did worse than Quist. He did worse than Thompson. He didn't win, and
he did worse than North Carolina.
Yeah, with South Carolina.
And you saw the part of the backlash, which is we're going to talk about later with Nancy Pelosi, is the realization that they're getting bludgeoned with her all across the country, and that it doesn't matter whether you dump a bunch of money into the race or you don't dump a bunch of money into the race, as the other races that you mentioned earlier in the year. They're still going to get hit with it, and now that it actually hurt the centrist Democratic theme, now you see a reaction towards Nancy Pelosi and that becoming a wider opposition to her becoming wider. But we can try and stay on this for now.
Well, I mean, this is that Panera Bread strategy, right? They have to win. They're going to win the Congress back through Panera Bread, when really they need to be they need to be campaigning at literally Arby's, right? Like that's where they need to be focusing their money at.
Well, that district, the median income of that district was $84,000. So yeah, they probably have some Arby's, but the reason why they said okay, Panera Bread, and the reason why they used that was just based on the median income of that thing. I was just listening to Nina Turner talking about how 2/3 of the voters said that lowering taxes was one of their major goals for this special election. Everyone who voted. So, I think they targeted the right people for who they wanted, their whole Romney campaign. I just don't think there are enough of them to actually swing a district like that. So you're targeting Arby's might be a better way to go. I think it is.
I mean, I think that they need to stop with this strategy, right? This was their strategy in general election. We're going to go for that center voter, that suburban soccer mom who doesn't like Trump because he uses naughty words, and we're going to pull them over to our party. We're going to transform them from a Republican to a centrist Democrat, because that's where the party is, that's where the future is, that's where everything. But these people, if they exist, they're not going to vote for you. Like, they're not going to vote for them.
Yeah. They'd rather vote for a Republican than Republican light.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard people say this is not a referendum on Trump, and it's not a referendum on Trump. This is a referendum on the Democratic Party and their brand. But go ahead, Adair. I'm sorry.
Adair's frozen.
Nope.
Okay, now he's muted.
No, his sound is off. Okay.
He's talking though. I mean, we can see him.
Anyway, but so let's talk about why Ossoff lost. Like, let's talk about why Ossoff actually lost this race, and
because he's a lanyarded smooth boy.
Well, he didn't have any message. Like, he had no proactive message, and the campaigning was awful, and he refused to get behind anything. Like, he refused to even call himself a liberal at some point, right? Like, he was.
Yeah, he refused to call himself a progressive. And one thing I noticed was that you pointed out that Handel said, "I'm against a livable wage," right? He refused to even run an ad with that soundbite that she said during a debate.
He wouldn't even run anti-AHCA ads.
Yeah,
like he essentially, the only ad I saw from, well, I mean, I saw a few ads, but my favorite was the Twitter ad that he ran.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Where he was tweeting, and I was like, oh dear, it would be more compelling if they just showed us his sexts, honestly. Like if he was, like, the ad was just him like sexting some, like, I don't know, some staffer.
Adair, do we have you back or no? No, I guess not. All right. Yeah, I think that his message was garbage. His platform was garbage. He was a garbage candidate, and I think it showed in the results. You know, he performed worse than Hillary Clinton did. In terms of vote count, he performed worse than the guy who just spent $1,000 to register and didn't run any ads and couldn't be found. You know, and like you said, they tied him relentlessly to Pelosi, saying that he was going to be Pelosi's little whipping boy in the House, and he was just going to do everything that she wanted. And that they went on the attack immediately. And one of the things I was surprised at, they didn't go after him for doing this horrible documentary with inside access to Kagame, but whatever. You know, that's his only political experience, and they didn't go after that.
I keep wanting to talk about Pelosi. I'll just hold my comment for now.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that then there's the thought that by removing her from leadership, but her still having her seat, that somehow that Republicans are going to stop using her as a weapon in these races around the country. And to me, that just seems absurd. I mean, with how Republicans are already have a loose relationship with facts and reality, the idea that Nancy Pelosi just being like a whip or being some other position, as if she would even accept that, it to me seems ridiculous. They're going to continue to use her as a weapon as long as she's an elected official, and probably even after she is.
Oh yeah,
if she has any
still
influence
using Reed.
Yeah, there you are. Exactly.
The election itself is not the end of the world. But Adair, are you unmuted now?
I've not been muted this entire time.
We can hear you now, but you're still a little quiet. But we can hear you.
I literally have no idea. I took my computer into Geek Squad. It's been running slow ever since.
You're fine now. So let's go. So we can hear you now. So what do you think about the Ossoff race? Like, why do you think he lost?
I already said it. I mean, again, you can't spend $30 million on a race on one person and then assume like that just because you threw that exorbitant amount of money out there, you're going to win a race. The fact of the matter is he had no message. The fact of the matter is he did not represent anything that would have actually helped anybody of the working class. To my knowledge, he was both against the livable wage, Medicare for all, et cetera, like the main talking points. Basically, he was your anti-Bernie Sanders. Like Clinton is the epitome of anti-Bernie Sanders rhetoric, but John Ossoff was literally that, I'm a millennial. And so because I'm a millennial, you have to like me and you have to think what I think. And because I'm going to say X, Y, and Z are bad, all millennials must think X, Y, and Z are bad without recognizing the fact of the matter that people, especially across the South, especially in rural areas, are absolutely doing terribly. You want to know this whole Panera Bread strategy, by the way? It's garbage. You know how bougie Panera Bread is? Like, what? I don't know poor people that can afford to frequent a Panera Bread. So this idea that's your idea of everyday average American it shows just how out of touch you are. The fact of the matter is, instead of focusing on what fast food preferences people have, you should just start focusing on what policies do people like. And the fact of the matter is people like livable wages. People like things like universal basic income. People like things like universal health care. Things that will actually make their lives demonstrably better are what they like. John Ossoff ran away from that. The Democrats are Republicans. They just don't have the balls to admit it yet.
Well, I mean, they ran that district because, as John said, not only was the median income incredibly high, but the average, education was also incredibly high. Like this was their crowd, right? This was, when they were explaining why they couldn't why they couldn't give money to hype for Quist and Thompson, they were trying to explain that, well, this is their ideal crowd, right? This is that upper middle class, highly educated, center right crowd, and if that strategy was going to work, it was going to work here. People hated Handel. Handel's awful.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, this is, like you said, this is their strategy. Schumer said, for every vote that we're going to lose in the rural areas, we're going to pick up 2 in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Well, this was the southern version of that suburb that they were shooting for, and they couldn't do it. They failed.
I mean, they failed in it, but and that's not to say that a broad progressive message is universally viable, right? That's not to say had they just come in on a wave of single payer and $15 minimum wage and all these other sort of ideas.
I'd actually beg to differ there.
Yeah, I do.
I beg to differ there because the more educated you are, the more you typically are in favor of policies like this. The more you go through, the higher you get in education, the more you're like, wow, you know what? This is actually a good thing. not only for me personally, but for the economy. And when you see a lot of these center-right folks, you see a lot of these people, they also agree that universal health care is something they find majorly important. Just because you have money does not mean you can't get sick and go bankrupt. I know several people that have had hospital bills for their family members totaling $500,000 or more. I don't care if you are a, upper middle class or, lower bourgeoisie, whatever you want to call it. That's a lot of money.
Petite bourgeoisie.
That is not something that's easy for people to pay off. Period. So let's not try to parse this out and say, well, he can't necessarily. Yes, he could have, and yes, he should have. Because that would have won him votes.
I want to quickly add. I just wanted to quickly add to Adair that there's also countless votes that get left where for the people that don't vote because they don't feel like they're represented, and because the politicians aren't representing policies that are in line with their ideas. And those people, there's a significant of them that lean far left and would support something like the policies we're talking about. But continue.
Oh, definitely.
And also, there was a big article in the week about that, about how, blaming the Green Party or blaming the third party in the general election is just ignoring the fact that the unactivated voters, and those are the voters that Adair is talking about reaching, and those are the voters that we can reach. And, to say that universal health care is far left is a misnomer. It's polling universally across the board. Yes, it's doing better on the left if you break it down by section, but at the same time, universally, it has over 60% approval rate.
No, that wasn't my point, though. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys all contradicting me, but my point was relative. But it was leading into this other. My larger point was that even if you don't think these things are broadly applicable, right? What they're doing is not working.
Right.
Their actual plan, which was represented by Ossoff, right? He was trying to win over that moderate Republican. He was trying to convert as opposed to mobilize, right? He was trying to convert as opposed to mobilize the non-voter. He was so focused on getting Republicans to vote, activating them to come over, that he refused to engage in any kind of proactive policy that would activate a non-voter. And Jeff Stein did some pseudo ethnographic work in the district, and just didn't talk to people who worked at not only Panera Bread, but also the Waffle House, and they weren't going to vote simply because they're anti-rich, they're anti-corporation, they're pro healthcare, and the Democratic Party they weren't putting that on the table in this particular race. And so I guess my point wasn't that the broad progressive message is not universally viable. I think it is. I think like all you guys, I think that if he had run on free public college, supporting single payer, supporting raising the minimum wage, he would have easily won this race, right? He would have easily won, and he would have done it without the need for $30 million in a whole cabal of think tanks.
Yeah, and you don't put the money there. You put it into getting people on the ground, going door to door, and getting people registered, and getting people engaged in the process as far in applicable to state laws. But yeah.
Oh, you mean you don't spend $3.5 million on an email campaign that your ex-buddy is running that screams at the top of the lungs every night, "We're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, give us money"?
They weren't lying. They weren't lying.
It might not be the most effective.
They run these email campaigns, but who are these emails going to? These emails are going to people who are already planning to vote for you. Stop it. Stop it. Put people on the ground. Get doors knocked, because that's how you actually win elections. That's what the data says. That's how you win elections. Apparently, all the Democrats are like, "Oh, we're all about the data." The data says what you're doing is wrong. Shut up, knock doors, or get the hell out of politics. Stop sending me emails. Stop it.
It's not to unpack.
You're going into the spam folder.
It's not to unpack right there. So the emails weren't meant to get people to vote. They were kind of just meant to raise more money.
Which is what these races are all about.
In general.
Yeah, I agree. And generally, they're for raising more money.
Yeah, it's about moving from money from the donor class to the political class and the media class. It's about shifting that money around and avoiding the traditional economic ways that we would balance out the workload and stuff. And so that's really where they're
Have you seen the email they were sending though? Did you see them? I posted them on my Twitter account. And they were think about the most desperate dating profile, thirsty fuckboy email from anybody to any any woman. And they were worse than that. They were a step above please respond. Like they were basically we're begging you, Melissa, please, like John Ossoff is relying on you. There was one that was essentially like a 5th grade hand pass note that said, "Do you like Paul Ryan, Melissa? Yes or no? Like, yes, no, maybe." And I was like, wow. Like, this is what $3.5 million. This is what $3.5 million buys you. This is the level of like political, like what is it?
Malpractice?
Intelligentsia. No, like this is like the political. This is their craft. This is their craft.
You know what I like? I saw an argument between that Adam bald-head asshole guy from the Hillary for America or Forward for Hillary or one of those PACs, and Michael Whitney and Mike Casca from the Bernie campaign, who both ran, and it basically ran the email stuff. And they were going back and forth about how the emails that they were sending out were ridiculous. They made no sense, and they didn't do anything. And like you said, they were thirsty. And, I mean, those two ran an incredible email campaign. I mean, you guys remember the emails we got for Bernie in the primary. There were some that were actually decently uplifting. They had a message. They were on point. They were never too long. They were never scaring, like trying to scare you into giving money. They were always like, hey, we got a race coming up, and we want to get some people on the ground. Or we got this going on, and we want to do this. We need your help.
Well, I mean, the money is meant to avoid having to have a message, ironically, but you can't outspin no proactive message. You can't outspin bad politics and bad policies. And I do agree. This is like in the vacuum. Ossoff losing is not the end of the world, right? It's important to remember that what these special elections are supposed to do. This is that they're supposed to be setting the stage for the midterms. Like if you can't win, you can at least get the ball rolling for a midterm victory.
Yeah, but they set the stage with we're lower taxes and we're gonna do deficits. We're gonna reduce deficits. Yeah,
that's the context. That's the context that makes this incredibly like the misspending and like the kind of candidate they ran is the part where it's the problem. Like had context, look, had he just lost, had Quist losing, Thompson losing, like they're like okay, setting the stage. Ossoff losing, why he lost, and how and how much money was spent on his campaign is actually an incredible problem.
Well, and how they spun the race leading up to like both the primary when they thought he might be able to walk away with it, and then also what they did leading up to this election, leaving people to believe that he had a good chance of winning when they really knew that he was probably going to lose. And so like if they didn't temper expectations, and that made things even worse than it would have been if they would have done that differently. Go ahead, Adair.
But here for me is the kicker is they're trying to spin it as a win. Like literally every Democrat, like major I've heard from or talked to or seen on Twitter or Facebook or whoever is like, we had such a great victory in Georgia. Yeah, I know we lost. We didn't have a seat, but we had such a $30 million was spent, guys. That's an amazing. Like, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely fucking nuts. I don't understand why
Well, think about how huge of an infusion of cash that is. That's a huge cash infusion to a Democratic Party in a place that normally would never see that kind of money coming, especially from other national sources, let alone locally. So it was a huge victory for them, even if it
the area.
Yeah.
It was the Collins campaign, and that's completely separate. Like they could maybe spin it as a win and say, "Hey, yeah, we've got a huge influx of cash to this local Dems chapter in this really, really Republican area. So now we can actually do more work. We can get people on the ground. We can get volunteers. We can get these things done." But that's not even what happened.
Yeah, no, because they already blew it.
We spent $30 million, so we won. No, it didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
You failed on such a colossal stage. It's gross.
Yeah,
some people got the checks.
I kind of agree with the mentality though. And I kind of agree with the mentality. Like, I think they do need to be running people in deep red districts. They need to be running people in every district. They need to be running people in literally every race, no matter how red a district is. They need to have Democrats running in that race. Yes. They need to have Democrats, on the ground, real Democrats, right? Not fake, virtual Democrats who are just there to fill a position on the ballot, but actual Democrats who are out there campaigning, getting their message out like a widespread. Because you know what that is? That's called being a leader. Yeah, that's called leading. That's called hey, we might not be. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, they're leading. Were you saying they're leading? But the problem is where that Lanyarded Smooth Boy was leading, I wouldn't follow. So you know what?
He wasn't leading anywhere.
Exactly. Well, he was. His message was deficit reduction. His message was ACA, not single payer. His message was 12, not 15. Like, these are the things where he was leading. He was leading exactly where the Clinton campaign was trying to lead us, and it's not where I want to go.
He was a status quo. He was a status quo candidate. Like he was so status quo. He was so milquetoast. And all he did was like he was basically a blank slate. And all he did was prove that sans the Clinton name, like another blank slate candidate who ran on that exact same platform with that exact same stuff probably would have done worse than she did. It's like Clinton did as well as she did because she was Hillary Clinton. And all of that experience that they touted on her was what made it as close as it was. And of course you have to balance that against the negative parts of that. But a blank slate candidate with those milquetoast centrist policies, they're not going to go. They're going nowhere fast.
And I mentioned quickly that, and I think John heard me and laughed a little, but that we're being unreasonable in that we're asking the Democratic Party to work against itself, to stop being what it is, to stop doing what it sees as its function, and that doesn't seem necessarily like a reasonable request. I mean,
like I've said before, and like we've said multiple times before. The Democrats don't want to win. The Democrats exist to make money. The Democrats do not exist to govern. When they do govern, the only policies in that they enact are ones that are going to make them more money. And so it goes to show, because I have a lot of people that I see on Twitter that are up in arms over the fact that the Democrats did not include Bernie Sanders on a list of people who, in a poll rather, to see who the base would rather have see nominated the 2020 election. He's not a Democrat, folks. Like, he's an independent. Woosah, calm down. And the Dems are still really hurt over the fact that they couldn't win with their flagship candidate against literally the worst candidate ever. So, I mean, the Dems are a hot pile of garbage. They have been a hot pile of garbage. They will continue to be a hot pile of garbage. They took a hard right turn in the 80s, and they're continuing to turn further and further right because for whatever reason, they feel like the best way to get out of this hole is to just keep digging.
Yeah, austerity. Neoliberalism will win.
I was thinking of the dumpster fire metaphor, but then I realized that they're more like a tire fire because they keep burning no matter how terrible they are. But go ahead, Brandon.
I mean, they're also trying to compare this. They're trying to compare this loss to Corbyn's loss.
Yes, I saw that.
And try to see
the chance to be PM. How is that even?
Because they're like, well,
related.
Not only that, but Corbyn overperformed. Like the Labor Party specifically. What? Labor Party overperformed. Like they picked up 30 seats. The Dem centrist establishment has picked up 0 seats since the election.
Well, what they're doing is they're comparing the last Tom Price election rather than comparing the Hillary and Trump election. So they're trying to say that 23% win that Tom Price had it's a pickup from that. But like I said, the guy that Tom Price ran against was non-existent. He only spent money on just registering his name on the ballot, didn't spend any on advertising or anything else. And when people went to interview him, they literally couldn't find the guy. So he didn't run. Tom Price ran unopposed, got 23%, and then the very next election, which was a presidential, which increases turnout, the Democratic candidate lost by 1.5 in this district. Well, the Democratic candidate just lost by 3.8 in this district. It's not a win. It's not even comparable to Corbyn.
I mean, it's not, but of course, this comes down to like just generally people wanting to somehow make this a referendum on like the far left and not the center. This is still some way a commentary on how that centrist politic is the place to be. And that's why, and now people are calling for Nancy Pelosi's head. They're calling for her head as the head of. They're calling for her head as the House Minority Leader, and she's pushing back, right, John? I know you have a long history with Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Nancy.
John.
If you need someone to blame, Nancy Pelosi is as good as anybody, right? Because under her, when she was the House Minority, when she was the Speaker of the House, and since she's become the House Minority Leader, they've lost over 1,000 seats.
Yeah, hemorrhage control. We're a couple of situations.
Let me put this in a metaphor you can understand. If you were as bad at your job as Panera Bread as she is at being, the leader of Democrats in the House, you wouldn't have your job at Panera Bread anymore.
Well, here's the thing.
Also, you would probably burn Panera Bread down.
She's very good at her job because her job is not to help the American people. Her job is not to actually
raise money.
Her job is to make money, and she has a net worth of $120 million. Why in the actual fuck are you in Congress, lady?
And on top of that, she consistently outraises.
You got $120 million. You know what I would do with $120 million? I would not have to worry about anything. Sit your ass at home. Go away. Go away. There needs to be term limits and a wealth cap on, representing people in Congress. Nah, you ain't one of the everyday average Joes. Nah, you got to go. Get the hell out.
I actually am against term limits.
You no.
I'll tell you.
She's a fundraising machine. No, don't get me wrong.
Yes,
she's a fundraising machine, and she can get you votes for things. It's like as speaker, this is not to say Nancy Pelosi is a bad leader. It's not to say she's in a vacuum. She is a good leader. She can raise money. She can get you votes for stuff. She can whip up the party. But what she's doing to what ends is the problem.
Yeah,
that's really the problem.
You need a turd sandwich. She'll have it to you quick like Jimmy John's, but it's going to be a turd sandwich still.
She doesn't whip up votes. She threatens votes. She says
that's fine.
No, that's not fine because this is no.
That's how the system works.
Right, here's why it's not fine. Shut the fuck up and let me talk. Because here's why it's not fine. The reason why it's not fine is because she's the head of the Democratic Party de facto right now. Her job is to spread that wealth around, to spread that money that she fundraises around. And so if your only tool to get votes for shitty things that wouldn't pass otherwise is to threaten, well, we won't spend any money in your district, which for the most part, they're not going to do unless they feel it's a safe district, they're going to win it anyways. That's shitty leadership. That's not you being a good leader. That's not you being an effective leader. That's you being a tyrannical dick. There's a difference.
Threatening people to get people to vote the right way is a bad thing. That tactic is still bad.
They're not voting the right way. Let's not just put this in a vacuum. Let's look at it what it is. They're not voting the right way. They're not voting. What she's doing is she's taking no votes and saying, okay, if you were going to vote no against this terrible policy, well, now I'm going to make you vote yes by saying I'm not going to give you any money if you don't do this.
Here's the thing, right?
That's not good leadership. That's shitty. That's just being a shitty person.
So here's the thing, right? So the goal, again, you said earlier, the goal of DCCC is not DCCC, which whatever. Or sounds like I'm saying DC Comics would have a little bit of a stutter, which I guess I do. But anyway, the goal of that organization or whatever you want to call it, it's essentially just a bank account. It's a bank account that's meant to store money for
certain people.
For certain people, it is to store money from a very few coastal cities: New York, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, and also Dallas, which is not. I don't know if that's on the coast of anything. That's my geography is not that great.
It's North Texas.
Thank you, Rand and McNally. Whatever. The point is it's not meant to generally just be used to win seats. It's meant to keep even under Rahm Emanuel, it was like that. This is really his doing, right? DCCC is the way it is a lot because of the way he did what he did, and it's meant to keep a very few people in power. And what we're seeing now too, and this is where Ossoff fits into this whole conversation, is that there is not a new generation of leaders coming up in the Democratic Party.
Well, they fight them. The DCCC.
Yeah, they fight them.
What they did in Pennsylvania. You can say there were problems with Fetterman. Fetterman had massive problems, but Fetterman was also pushing back against the entirety of neoliberalism, saying that we need a new direction, we need to do this. He was going against the party line on that. And rather than holding back and spending when the primary was settled, the DCCC injected money directly into the primary fight with his centrist opponent, who got her ass handed to him.
Look, the Democratic Party of Washington State has said anybody that tries to challenge Denny Heck, who is the congressman here of the 10th CD in Washington, anybody that tries to challenge him, Mr. Super centrist, let me stick my nose all up your booty hole, Democratic National Committee, please give me more of that neoliberalism. Anybody that tries to challenge him is shut down. They funnel money. They will spend exorbitant amounts of money to just giving it directly to Denny Heck. And nope, he's going to stay. It's you're right. The Democratic Party does not want new leadership. The old folks are going to have to die out. That's literally what we're at. Congress is old as shit.
Yes.
It's not even,
you don't have to be that old to run for Congress. You don't have to be that old to be qualified for politics. You don't have to be that old. That's why you have staff. That's why you have all this support there. We have to start, and we have to impose term limits because you got people that have been in the Senate for damn near 50 years.
I'm against term limits. I'm against term limits.
I know you're against term limits. I think you're ridiculous for it.
I'll give you second half. In the second half, I'll give you progressive reasons why a progressive should be against term limits.
Regardless of whether or not you're against or for term limits, we have to agree that the Democratic Party, even by the nature of this conversation about who should be running for president, what Joe Biden will be literally 3,000 years old in 2020.
And racist fucking
Bernie Sanders will be approximately 4,463 years old in 2020. Perhaps we should run somebody who is a little bit younger. I'm not saying we run someone as young as John Ossoff, who looks like he should have been running for 5th grade class president. But I'm saying that maybe we should just, start cultivating a new class of leader. I mean, I guess Cory Booker's around the right age. He's awful, but he's around the right age. Yeah, right. He's around the right age. Kamala Harris is kind of around the right age.
Well, she's awful too.
Yeah, but my larger point is
what a good game right now.
I mean, they're trying to cultivate a new class. I mean, they're trying. It's not in the image that any of us are after.
But the thing about the new class they're cultivating has no sort of personality, because if they had too much personality, they would be more likely to depose them. Someone ran against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House, Tim Ryan from Ohio, and he was like, we need to go more left.
What they want to do is they want to have a more multicultural and more diverse. They want to face on the same neoliberal policies that are meant to oppress and abuse.
Don't lie to people. No, they don't.
Well, they don't want it. They don't want it, but they're willing. That's their concession.
They want to put Nancy Pelosi's brain in a robot body.
Yeah. Exactly. Diversify the leadership into cyborg entities as well. But they don't want to, but that's what they view as their concession. Their concession is allowing a multicultural face onto the neoliberal policies that are meant to oppress the same people that they're trying to use their faces of.
So more female prison guards. More female prison guards.
One second. I do want to move into talking about Philando Castile, so I want Adair to have the last word. And obviously the Philando Castile.
Let's move forward.
Okay, obviously the Philando Castile conversation is going to take longer than the 15 minutes we have left. So we'll probably finish in the better half of the show. And so if you watched this far, I would suggest going to the SoundCloud again. SoundCloud.com/Discourse to hear the rest of the conversation after the show is over. Again, thank you, Ben, for allowing us to be on your channel. Thank you, our listeners. Thank you, our patrons. If you feel so inclined to become a patron of Discourse, please. The Patreon link is at the bottom of the screen and also in the description. And so I did want to talk a little bit about, because the Philando Castile shooting, the case against Geronimo Yanez was, decided this week, and I feel like we should definitely talk about that. I do feel like we talk about this kind of topic a lot, though. So who wants to, who wants to broach it?
I watched the videos, and I saw the video on Facebook or not Facebook, but on Twitter when it first came out, of her filming the cop after he was shot, and I couldn't stomach it. And then seeing the videos now of the dash cam and of her daughter telling her, Mommy, you need to be quiet. I don't want you to get shot. Like, all of that, I don't even know what to say. It's just so fucking horrifying. And then to think that this asshole got off because he was able to justify on basically a gross stand your ground type defense. Let's
back up a little bit ago. So what happened essentially is that this week, Geronimo Yanez, I'm sorry, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. The police officer who shot Philando Castile in Minnesota was acquitted of the manslaughter charges that were being brought against him as a result of that shooting, right? For those of you who don't remember, the Philando Castile case was the one that was the incident where the man was shot while at a traffic stop, and his girlfriend at the time was live stream him bleeding out to Facebook directly. And so that's the Philando Castile case. And again, as John just mentioned, he was acquitted based under the notion that it was reasonable for him to be afraid of Philando. This raises a lot of questions for me, but I'm going to get everyone's first thoughts on this real quick. So, Adair, go ahead. Nothing to say?
Nope.
I'll just start.
Richard,
I don't accept a country that doesn't consider that murder. And I mean, he got acquitted of manslaughter, which he wasn't even up for murder. But to me, that was murder. And I mean, a minimum manslaughter, if you want to be technical about the legal definition. And so I don't accept a country that continues that. And so, I mean, I'm going to continue to do what I can to fight to prevent that from happening. But it's definitely going to take. I've heard comments about, well, if there was more outrage, like some conservative publications mentioned that this was a miscarriage of justice, I think, in the National Review and a couple other headlines that
intimated this was too racist for the National Review.
Yeah,
that's like the National Review is like 0.75 Jeff Sessions.
Hold on, real quick, just because I want to make sure that we're clear about this. The officer that shot was a non-black person of color. By the definition, right, he was not racist. However, this is something that has to be addressed within communities of color. And as someone who belongs to non-black communities of color, anti-blackness in these other communities has to be addressed, because anti-blackness plays directly into white supremacy, plays directly into the fact that police are white supremacists, an arm of the white supremacy in this country, and that's why he got off.
He was absolutely racist.
You cannot be racist as a person of color. He does not have the ability to oppress us based on the fact that he's non-white. The fact of the matter is, though, anti-blackness is an arm of white supremacy. He's a police officer, which is the lethal arm of one of the lethal arms of white supremacy in this country, one of the lethal legal arms, and therefore, this was a miscarriage of justice due to racism. However, the cop himself is not racist.
Even if I were to believe that, which I don't, because let's talk about what he said for why he shot him. Right? He went up to his justification was that he smelled burning marijuana in the car.
Anti-blackness.
And then when he heard that, that the guy had a gun, Castile had a gun, he was licensed to carry a firearm in the state of Minnesota. He literally had his license to carry on him. He thought that he might be a drug dealer who had just come back from dealing drugs or some of these other things. And I believe he said, what was his exact quote? Oh, that if he was willing to smoke pot in front of a 5-year-old, he would definitely be willing to shoot a cop. Like what?
Let's parse this out.
I'm parsing now.
Because you're making a claim that he's racist, right? But here's the thing.
I think this is partially a semantic issue, but continue.
This is partially a semantic issue, but let's be realistic here. He cannot oppress black people in terms of race. That is what racism is in this country. He can be anti-black. You can internalize racism and you can internalize anti-blackness. You and I both know damn well that there's a huge problem in the black community even of internalized racism and internalized anti-blackness. That is not the same as racism. I can't oppress you as a black man because I'm also a black man. Like that's not feasible.
I can't
oppress you as a person of color.
I guess arguably,
that's not feasible, but I can't have anti-blackness. I can't have anti-black traits. And there have been some really great articles out there for my non-black people of color, myself included in that because I am mixed. Read those. Look at what's going on and try to get that understanding that you can participate in anti-blackness, you can participate in racism without being racist.
I operate from a different definition of racism, which is probably where we're coming out with not necessarily a semantic argument so much as we're coming from like we're operating from we're using different operating definitions of what racism is. And my definition is very simply that racism is the entire structure of separating people into different races and ascribing certain characteristics to those people based on that race and pretending that they're natural or biological or rooted in some sort of biological, like there's some sort of biological essentialism to racial categories. And so why I say that the cop is racist is because mostly everyone is racist. It's like, by being socialized in a society that is racist, you don't have an option of not being racist. You get an option to fight your racism by acknowledging that it exists. But again, this comes down to, whether we're talking about what happened with Philando Castile or any other of these shootings, this quibbling over, this reduction of racism down to very, very minute, very, very specific things, right? So it's like, oh, well, you're not racist if you don't say the N-word, or you're not racist if you're not, you can't be, that's not to say, the issue is you can't be racist you can't oppress white people, but racism is not limited to necessarily oppression so much as limited to the entire system that describes racism.
You cannot remove racism and oppression in this country. Those two are so interconnected that you cannot
Of course you can't.
just take this. No, you can't. You cannot look at this and just say, well,
no. I said you can't. I said, of course you can't. Can't. I agree with you.
Okay. Okay. Like the reality we live in.
Because part of racism is that race is a structure. Is a hierarchy and a ranking system.
Yeah.
One that puts white people at top and black people at bottom. Like
Which is
go ahead.
Which is why we have this term anti-blackness. And we also have the term anti-black racism, which is something that you can see from white folks, where you can see a lot of times, and we've dealt with this on, a good example is Evergreen State College. We've dealt with a lot of anti-black racism on campus. We've also dealt with a lot of anti-blackness from other people of color. That's not to say that what they're doing is not rooted in racism, is not rooted in prejudice, is not rooted in oppression. But that is to say that you have to take into account the dynamics in which that we are interacting. And so my dynamic with another person of color, who may be a non-black person of color, is completely different than my interactions with a white person in power. Even my interactions between a black person in power, a black cop, for example, I'm still fighting because they're a cop, because they're an agent of the white supremacy, because they are a cop. Because they can still subscribe to that anti-blackness. And I'll be the first one to tell you that growing up, I definitely had some very skewed views about what it meant to be a black person, what blackness was to me, because I was fed this idea of what blackness was in the community, out of the community, and via the media. So that's something that we see a lot of times. Nobody's exempt to it.
But the thing is,
but you say that you're just a racist is to, in my opinion, completely limit the discussion and close off this because we have to take into account the systems of oppression. I can definitely agree with you. I think that lobbying. I think I can agree with from a standpoint of like expediency and being clear what we were lobbying. The term racist colloquially definitely means what you mean. But and even then, just shifting the conversation a little bit, I would say that when we talk about police brutality, some people are resistant to the idea that the police are inherently racist and like a racist structure to begin with. It's like that, they're reflective, and that's why I say racism is a societal thing, a cultural thing, because all of our structures reflect racism. Yeah. Like from our schools to our hospitals to our roads to our water treatment plants, like all of our public services are reflective. Our brick and mortar, our laws, are brick and mortar examples of racism. And when we talk about police brutality, and this is one of the problems with this. People limit the conversation about the oppression that black people face to these very, very excessive instances, right? Of like police brutality, a black person is shot in the streets, and, it gets 1 million hits on YouTube, 1 million hits, clicks on your article if you're Sean King, and in this cycle, but it never deepens the conversation about what racism really is, and it just polices the edges, right? Like all those get people into this outrage at this stuff, but mostly police brutality happens a lot, but it doesn't kill as many black people as racism does generally, especially on structural racism. It's just the most visible, visceral form of it. And when your conversation about structural racism begins and ends with police brutality, you do a disservice to the black community, because really it's like the black community dies 1 million small deaths a day with prison and school prison pipeline, with the discrepancy in maternal death rates at hospitals, with basically any disease due to treatment differences. It's ultimately this conversation about racist structures in society tend to be hijacked by people who are just trying to make a quick click to be just about this.
Well, and in cases with police brutality, it's usually just when it gets to the extreme, when it's murder. It's not even like the millions of interactions that are problematic every day or on a yearly basis. The stop and frisk that we saw in New York City, something like that hardly would even get any attention anymore, because it's not a video of somebody getting murdered on the street. And so that's the threshold of getting attention and dragging and attracting those clicks. And it just keeps escalating. I
want to point something out real quick, and I'm just looking at, and I'm looking at this right now. I'm looking at the life expectancies of black people in the U.S. So black people in the U.S. have an average life expectancy of 75.5 years. Asians have 86.6. Latinx people are coming in at 82.89. Native folks are coming in at 81.7, and white folks are coming in at 79.12. The fact of the matter is, we're not expected to live very long by any metric.
Generally, generally life expectancy hasn't actually gone up that much in a long time, right?
White people
the life
dropping.
Let's look at this for what it is.
No, definitely a discrepancy.
Like,
but I guess my larger point with that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was getting life expectancy in general. No, you're right. There's a big discrepancy between life expectancies between races. But like even more poignant point is that life expectancy hasn't really gone up that much to begin with. What has happened is that death rate has gone down, but infant mortality rate has gone down. Yeah. And but for the lowest 50% of earners, there has been really no increase in life expectancy.
Right.
But that's what the black thing comes in too.
Yeah, that's my larger point there too. It's because it definitely has to do with your economics. Because I've told white folks, like, yeah, you absolutely suffer from environmental neglect because you're poor, but you don't experience environmental racism or the structural racism that black folks do, that Latinx people do, that Native folks do. And the reason behind that is because racism is inherently systemic. The police are just an arm of the white supremacy. The policing and police in general are an act of white supremacy. They're an act of militarized white supremacy. They are meant to be an occupying army. They are meant to instill fear. They are meant to keep blacks in line. Like, that's literally how policing started. Policing started as runaway slave patrols, things like that. So it's so deeply rooted in racism that you can't remove it now. I don't give a damn if your best friend's a good cop. I don't care if your dad, uncle, brother, whoever is a good cop. They, by manner of being police, are participating in white supremacy, are part of that militarized version of white supremacy, which is why I don't have an issue with people from the Middle East who say they hate Americans, they hate all Americans, because of the ones they have to deal with are an occupying force, are the ones there that are committing war crimes, because they are the victims of oppression, same way that the communities of color feel about police. So just because I interact with a black police officer doesn't mean that I suddenly feel a whole lot more comfortable. I don't. That uniform supersedes your blackness. That anti-blackness that uniform represents. To you, you step out, you stop being black, you play this caricature, and this is something that we've talked about before, that we assume racism is limited to poor, non-college educated white males, that are from rural areas.
Well, we have to close the show for the night right now. I mean, not close the show out, but obviously we're going to transition into the better half of the show. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to post that later. Thank you for joining us for the first hour. Sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning. It's been wonderful.
Wait, the second half to hear me finish my point.
Yeah, stay tuned for Ben, and have a good night.
Bye. Brandon still sucks.